Hello and welcome to News9 Live. I'm Sumaira Khan, and in this show I will bring to you the latest that's happening between Israel and Hamas. As reported, 7,700 Palestinians have been killed as IDF's ground operations entered day 3. IDF released video of expanded military operations in the Gaza Strip. Telephone communications and internet connectivity were gradually returning to the Gaza Strip in the early hours of Sunday morning. According to reports by Palestinian media, the destruction of phone and internet connections plunged Gaza into a communications blackout on Friday night, creating an information vacuum amid the heaviest aerial bombardment of the war so far. Gaza's 2.3 million people were already in darkness after most electricity was cut off and fuel for generators ran out. No international aid entered the Gaza Strip on Saturday, according to the Palestinian Red Crescent. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that the military had opened a quote-unquote second stage in the war, which aimed to destroy the military and governmental capabilities of Hamas and bring the hostages home. He also added, quote-unquote, the battle within the Gaza Strip will be difficult and long. This is our second war of independence. Netanyahu met with the families of hostages on evening of 28th October following a protest by relatives outside the Defense Ministry headquarters in Tel Aviv. It was unclear what reassurances he could offer, as there appears to be no plan to negotiate prisoner exchange or pause the offensive, which Hamas has said is a condition of any release. Last week, Hamas had said approximately 50 hostages died in the bombardment. Relatives fear the recent escalation of Israel's assault on Gaza will lead to further deaths of these hostages. UN Security Council is to meet on Monday, that is 30th of October, after Israel's expanded Gaza operations. But Israel has expanded its ground operations. It has entered the day 3. 1.4 million Palestinians have been displaced in Gaza till now. And Israel has categorically said that there will be no let-up in the aerial bombardment of Gaza Strip. The Israel Defense Forces, that is IDF, released footage on Saturday, that is October 28th, of what it said was the start of a second stage in a war against the Islamist group Hamas, which is running the Palestinian enclave. The footage showed Israeli tanks in operation in the Gaza Strip and Israeli forces striking what they said were buildings used as meeting points by Hamas. Israel has blockaded and bombarded Gaza for 3 weeks after the Islamist group Hamas October 7th assault killed 1,400 Israelis in the deadliest day of the nation's 75-year history. Though there was no indication of an invasion en masse, Israel said troops sent into Gaza on Friday night were still in the field, focusing on infrastructure including the extensive tunnel network built by Hamas. Israel again told Gazans to move away from the north, where it says Hamas is hiding under civilian buildings. Palestinians say nowhere is safe, with bombs also smashing homes in the south of the densely populated territory. So it's not as if only the north is unsafe for civilians, it is also the south that is unsafe, because the bombs have been smashing homes in the south of the densely populated territory of Gaza. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has issued a warning of a prolonged and challenging conflict as Israel's military invasion of the Gaza Strip gets underway. This comes as Hamas demands the release of Palestinian prisoners in exchange for the hostages they seized 3 weeks ago. The United Nations has also raised concerns about the potential for a high civilian casualty count in Gaza. Netanyahu emphasized that Israel has entered a second stage in its operation against Hamas, involving ground forces and expanded attacks. So according to Benjamin Netanyahu, this is the second stage of the war that they have started against Hamas. He framed this as a fight for Israel's survival, asserting that they will be victorious. We will do what is right for us. This is total evil against total justice. Gantz also says that justice will win. We will end up not only stronger, but also more united. Benny Gantz who is the war cabinet minister, said that there is no diplomatic time limit, only an operational clock that Israel is operating on.
אתמול בערב נכנסו כוחות קרקעיים נוספים שלנו בשערי עזה, בפתחו של מעוז הרשע. זהו השלב השני של המלחמה, שמטרותיה ברורות. השמדת היכולות הצבאיות והשלטוניות של החמאס, והחזרת החטופים הביתה. שבכל שלב עד עכשיו, ובכל שלב מעכשיו, אנחנו נמצא כל אפשרות להחזיר את אחינו ואחיותינו החטופים לחיק משפחותיהם. המלחמה בתוככי הרצועה תהיה קשה וארוכה, ואנחנו ערוכים לכך. אחרי המלחמה, כולם יצטרכו לתת תשובות לשאלות קשות, זה כולל אותי, שהמהלך הקרקעי, שאנחנו הרחבנו אותו, יסייע לנו במשימה הקדושה הזאת. בזה אנחנו עוסקים עכשיו. אני לא יכול להגיד לך בהכרח שבפעולה הספציפית הזאת, ברגע הספציפית הזה, הם היו שותפים למיקרו-תכנון, אבל זה שהם מגבים את מכונת המלחמה של החמאס, הם מקיימים אותה, בלי הפיגומים האלה אין חמאס, כמו שאין חיזבאללה, בלי איראן.
אנחנו נפעל לעיצוב מחדש של המרחב, והלחימה בטרור מול עזה תימשך בשטח הרצועה לעומקה, בכל מקום, בכל זמן שנידרש לכך, בכדי להבטיח את ביטחון היישובים שיחזרו ויבנו מחדש באזור. התמרון הוא רק שלב אחד במהלך ארוך טווח שכולל היבטים ביטחוניים, מדיניים וחברתיים שיארכו שנים. לא נבטח עוד באחרים, נדיבים ככל שיהיו. רק אנחנו נגן על עצמנו ועל כל יהודי. מאחורי הדמעות שלנו עומדת מדינה ועומד כוח חזק וצודק. היום אני מבקש להגיד לכם, סכנת ההשמדה לא תהיה מנת חלקנו, אלא גורלם של מבקשי רעתנו.
Also, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said on Saturday, October 28th, that Israeli forces had unleashed the second phase of the Gaza war as they pressed ground operations against Hamas militants, vowing to, quote-unquote, destroy the enemy above ground and below the ground.
Israel is now in its second phase of the Gaza war, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said on Saturday, adding that forces are carrying out ground operations against Hamas militants. The war inside the Gaza Strip will be difficult and long, and we are prepared for it, he said. This Israel Defense Forces footage purports to show that second stage unfolding in the Hamas-ruled Palestinian enclave. Netanyahu once again called on Palestinian civilians to leave the northern Gaza Strip, the focus of Israel's attack. Israel has tightened its blockade on Gaza and bombarded it for 3 weeks now. People are isolated, with a telephone and internet blackout that began on Friday. Many buildings there have been reduced to rubble. People are scrambling for food, water, fuel, and medicine. Gaza health authorities say over 7,500 Palestinians have been killed in the campaign. On October 7th, an assault by Hamas killed 1,400 Israelis in the deadliest day of the nation's 75-year history. Meanwhile, there has been growing concern internationally over the toll from the bombing in Gaza and calls for a pause to let aid get to civilians. Here's UN Human Rights Chief Volker Turk.
I am raising alarm about the possibly catastrophic consequences of large-scale ground operations in Gaza and the potential for thousands more civilians to die. Continued violence is not the answer.
Also on Saturday, Netanyahu met with families of Israelis being held hostage in Gaza by Hamas, vowing to exhaust every possibility to bring the more than 200 of them home.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Saturday, 28 October, together with his wife Sarah at the Kiryat in Tel Aviv, met for the second time with representatives of the families of the captives in Gaza. Prime Minister Netanyahu promised the representatives that he would do everything possible to bring about the release of all of the captives and said that this was one of the goals of the war. His wife Sarah embraced the families and expressed her support for them at this unbearable time for each one of them in particular and for the state as a whole. Benjamin Netanyahu also said, and I quote, "I must tell you before we go into a few more limited details that not only is this effort unceasing, it is continuing and will do so vigorously. We will utilize and exhaust every possibility to bring them home," unquote. This is before and after the incursion, and the effort is to utilize our capabilities. It is an integral part of the goals for the operations as we have defined them. This is not mere lip service. Meanwhile, in Gaza, Gaza's besieged people had barely any communications with the outside world on Saturday, October 28th, as Israeli jets dropped more bombs. The Israeli military chief said a long-threatened ground offensive against Hamas terrorists is running the Palestinian enclave was gearing up. The Israeli offensive has led to many buildings being reduced to rubble, and shelter is hard to find. Gazans are short of food, water, fuel and medicines. Their plight got worse from the night of October 27th when phone and internet services were cut. Followed by heavy bombing through the night, Israel has blockaded and bombarded Gaza for 3 weeks after the Islamist group Hamas' October 7th assault, which Israel said killed 1,400 Israelis in the deadliest day of the nation's 75-year history. But for Gazans to stay without electricity, without fuel, without water has been difficult, and now also without communication because the internet and the phone communication has cut them off completely. As Israel bombarded Gaza, some rockets fired from the Palestinian enclave fell on southern Israel in the border area on October 28, setting off fires and smoke. At one point, a ring of fire was visible on the Israeli side. The Israeli military said it had entered northern Gaza overnight on 27th October and expanded military operations with infantry and armored corps as it steps up its assault on the Hamas militant group. Speaking in Beirut, Hamas official Ghazi Hamad said fighters were battling with Israeli forces and called for an immediate implementation of the United Nations General Assembly decision to allow humanitarian relief into Gaza. He also warned of a disaster that is waiting to happen. A rocket smashed into the shore of Israel's southern city of Escalates on October 28th, hours after Israel said its troops had entered northern Gaza overnight and expanded military operations, stepping up its assault on Hamas. According to Israeli media reports, several rockets were fired at Escalates at around 3:10 local time. So far, there have been no reports of the casualties in Escalates. Escalates is a city of around 150,000 residents. It lies just under 20 kilometers from the Gaza Strip. Escalates has been a target of the rockets that are being fired from the Gaza Strip by Hamas. There have been many attempts by Hamas to target the city of Escalates, which is just 20 kilometers from the Gaza Strip. This was also one of the cities where on October 7th, the Hamas fighters had entered. The US military carried out strikes against 2 facilities in Syria used by Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and groups it backs. The Pentagon said on October 26th in response to a spate of attacks against US forces in both Iraq and Syria.
Strikes by 2 U.S. F-16 fighter jets on weapons and ammunition facilities in Syria on Friday are fueling fears that the Israel-Hamas conflict may spread in the Middle East. President Joe Biden ordered the mission in retaliation for attacks on U.S. forces by Iranian-backed militia. The Pentagon said the 2 facilities targeted near Abu Kamal, a Syrian town on the border with Iraq, were used by Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps and militia groups. U.S. and coalition troops have been attacked at least 19 times in Iraq and in Syria by Iran-backed forces in the past week.
Let me say this before this council.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken told the United Nations on Tuesday that Washington would act swiftly if the attacks by Iran's proxies continued.
The United States does not seek conflict with Iran. We do not want this war to widen. But if Iran or its proxies attack U.S. personnel anywhere, make no mistake, we will defend our people, we will defend our security, swiftly and decisively.
Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and Lebanon's Hezbollah are all backed by Tehran. Biden sent a rare message to Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei warning against targeting U.S. personnel in the Middle East, the White House said on Thursday. Iran's Foreign Minister Hussein Amir Abdullahian followed up with this warning at the United Nations.
I say frankly to the American statesmen who are now managing the genocide in Palestine that we do not welcome to expansion of the war in the region. But I warn, if the genocide in Gaza continues, they will not be spared from this fire.
The United States has already sent warships and fighter aircraft to the region over the last 3 weeks. And on Thursday at the Pentagon, Brigadier General Patrick Ryder confirmed about 900 more U.S. troops are due there.
While I won't talk specific deployment locations for these forces, I can confirm that they are not going to Israel, and that again, they are intended to support regional deterrence efforts and further bolster U.S. force protection capabilities.
The recent Hamas terror attacks have raised concerns among Israelis. This is leading a few to contemplate leaving the country due to worries about their safety and frustration with their government's perceived inability to protect them.
Shani could be living her happiest life. She and her friend Noah both recently became mothers for the first time. But being safe as Jews in Israel no longer feels like a given.
I'm 33 years old. I never felt like I need to be ready to go. Israel is my country, is my home. It was always like history, was always stories that happened in the past that never happen again. But now, now it's our life.
They want to be able to leave if they have to, so they're organizing paperwork for their babies.
Carmi doesn't have a passport yet, so we're preparing that. Earlier his vaccinations, that won't hold us up from leaving if we will need to leave.
The women's conversation revolves around the question of whether to stay or go. They say many people are torn.
Israel is made of us, the Jewish people, and if we all leave, nobody will be left. And it's also very sad to think about it.
Here in Tel Aviv, hardly anyone feels like swimming. The mood is somber. Everyone is on edge.
This is our country. We don't have any other place. So, yes, I'm scared, I'm afraid, but I'm not leaving. Never.
A lot of conceptions we had and stories that we told ourselves about what gives us security just broke 2 weeks ago. And now we are trying to establish new stories to tell ourselves what it means to be safe here in Israel.
These people are not alone in their concern.
Before October 7, a strong element of Israeli society was trust.
that the state could largely keep people safe despite the regional hostility. That has changed. A recent poll suggests that 2/3 of Israelis are extremely concerned or frightened, and more than 4/5 see the attack as a failure of the government. Those poll numbers sound shocking, but are they? Dalia Scheindlin is a public opinion analyst focusing on peace and conflict research in Israel.
They are pretty shocking considering that it's very rare for Israelis to have any sort of consensus. This is a perennially divided society. It's been politically and socially divided since the start of statehood. But then again, we are in unusual times. And I think Israelis are going through that together in the sense that the state has let them down.
Getting out of Israel has been difficult since the attack. Many flights have been canceled. But along with foreigners, Israelis are leaving, even if only for a while. Noah and Shani don't know yet where they might go if they decide to leave.
Our considerations is, does the government is pro-Israel, and the population, is it Muslim, like most Muslim, Christians, Jews, where we have an Israel, like a big Israeli community? Those will be the consideration we will take. It's ironic that now we need to find a safe place outside of Israel. And this is the big dilemma, because in our soul, we do feel safe here, but in reality, it's not safe.
Their dearest hope is to raise their babies in peace. But they say growing anti-Semitism worldwide means it is increasingly difficult to say where that might be.
Meanwhile, Prime Minister Modi spoke with Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, exchanged views on the deteriorating security and humanitarian situation in West Asia. And I quote, "We share concerns regarding terrorism, violence and loss of civilian lives. We agree on the need for early restoration of peace and stability and facilitating humanitarian assistance," unquote. Cryptocurrency's role in terrorist financing and funding terrorist groups has come under renewed scrutiny following the deadly attack in Israel. Here's a report and take a look.
There has been a lot of focus on how crypto is used to fund terrorist organizations and militant groups. So since the Palestinian militant group Hamas launched an attack on Israel at the start of October, the role of crypto in funding militant groups and terror organizations has really come into the spotlight. Hamas itself has been known to raise money via cryptocurrencies. Over the past few weeks, the Israelis have frozen several cryptocurrency wallets it said were linked to Hamas. Many people say that crypto is an extremely useful tool for these kind of organizations. It's largely anonymous. The money that anyone sends over the blockchain, that's the technology that underpins cryptocurrency, is usually just identified by a string of letters and numbers. It's difficult to track, and this means that for militant groups or terrorists seeking to raise money, crypto has become a very popular tool. Now, it's not completely anonymous. Cryptocurrency companies, that means exchanges, as well as law enforcement organizations, can actually work out who is sending the money, but it takes a bit of work for them to do that. The United Nations official said in 2022 that about 5% of terror attacks were considered to be financed by cryptocurrencies. A variety of cryptocurrencies are known to be used by terrorist groups and militant groups to raise funds. That said, while Bitcoin is popular, stablecoins, that's a type of cryptocurrency that's designed to keep a very steady value, have become more popular in recent years. There are also a number of other sources that these groups use to raise funds. That's anything from charities, shell companies, investments overseas, to also raise funds. So crypto is definitely part of the mix, but it's very difficult to say exactly what proportion.
Meanwhile, displaced Palestinians were seen sheltering underneath makeshift tents at Khan Yunis in the southern Gaza Strip on Sunday. Israel's military had on Saturday reissued a call for Palestinians to evacuate the northern Gaza Strip ahead of an impending Israeli operation. Israel, which says Hamas has placed its weapons and forces among civilians, has been telling Gaza's residents to move south for their own safety. More than 1.4 million Gazans have flooded their homes for temporary shelters under Israel's heaviest ever bombardment. The Gazans are living under these makeshift tents in the Khan Yunis area. Nearly 1.4 million Gazans have fled their homes so far and have moved to temporary shelters under Israel's heaviest ever bombardment. Also now, the ground offensive has also stepped into day 3. Smoke was again seen over the Gaza skyline. Blasts continue to ring out even as an eerie silence can be felt across the strip.
Okay.
The bombardment continues and clouds of smoke over the Gaza Strip can be seen from far off. There is an eerie silence because a number of civilians have fled this area, but still many remain. The situation for Palestinians and the ground situation in Gaza is very grim. Buildings have been reduced to rubble as Israel has been bombarding this area continuously since 7th of October. On October 7th, Kibbutz Be'eri became one of the first Israeli communities targeted by Hamas terrorists. It's been over 2 weeks now and dozens of residents remain missing. Shockingly, authorities have yet to identify all the bodies.
Security is tight in Kibbutz Be'eri today. But at dawn on the morning of October 7th, the army was nowhere to be seen. The more than 1,000 people living here were among the first to be attacked by Hamas fighters. They roamed the kibbutz for hours, firing machine guns, grenades, rocket launchers. The Hamas-led terrorists moved from house to house over hours, killing civilians or taking them hostage. Today, this kibbutz is deserted. All what's left are burnt, destroyed houses and a community in ruins. The Israeli authorities want the world to see this and hear from people who were there.
They burned the house on them, smoke them out. And when they finally opened the doors because they couldn't breathe anymore, they decided who's to live, who's to die.
Rami Gold was part of a small group defending the kibbutz. He said they fired till they ran out of bullets.
And I got to tell you that story because 2 angels came. 2 people from reserve soldiers, I have no idea where they came from. Came to us, gave us ammunition and a cell phone so we can call our families to tell them we're okay. And we kept on going, kept on fighting till it was dark, till the army arrived.
When the fighting stopped, emergency responders looking for survivors found scenes of horror.
She was butchered open, the stomach was... Small children, a boy and a girl, hands tied to the back and tortured. And I'll say tortured now, yes, I'll say it. The father was without an eye. They took out his eye. The mother a breast was cut off. And while the children were brutally attacked, and they are sitting in the middle and eating the food of the holiday food, holiday meal that this family was supposed to eat.
Physical evidence of what happened at places around the country arrives here at a makeshift morgue in central Israel. These are some of the up to 200 unaccounted for people. More are still being found.
We are working day and night at shifts, trying to identify each and every one.
This is hard because people were disfigured, mutilated, burned.
We are here doing what we're doing because we're thinking this is a holy mission. For us, identifying the last casualties and all of the civilians that got killed is so important. It's for us, we want to give them their final respect.
Families waiting to bury their dead and those who saw what happened are angry as well as bereft. At Kibbutz Be'eri, Hamas killed more than 100 people, around 10% of the community. Emergency responder Yossi Landau, who saw the horror, says Hamas cannot be part of the future.
We went through a lot. We went through the Holocaust. We went through a lot. We'll be strong. The world is supporting us. Yes, we want the peace. It's a very important thing, the peace. Yes, but not with Hamas.
Peace seems a faraway prospect, here in the ruins of Kibbutz Be'eri.
Israeli troops expelled a prominent Palestinian activist from his home in a key West Bank city. This action followed his hosting of a foreign journalist and a well-known Israeli activist. Critics argue the military used the Israel-Hamas war as a pretext to remove Issa Amro from Hebron. Have a look at the report.
Friday prayers sound out in Ramallah, the West Bank's biggest city. But the faithful's prayers soon turned to protest against Israel's devastating strikes on Gaza. This woman says her whole family is there.
Shame for what is happening to them. They slaughtered children and women. We do not forgive the Arab countries because they let us down. They did not stand by us. They left us alone. I hope someone will listen. We don't need empty words. We need someone that stands by us.
And more feel that Hamas is doing just that. We are your soldiers, Mohammed Daif, they chant, praising Hamas's military wing commander. The West Bank is not governed by Hamas, but by Fatah, the party that controls the Palestinian Authority, or PA. It's widely seen as weak, corrupt and ineffective, and now more than ever. The PA blames Israel and the West for its fragile legitimacy, growing by the day.
Don't forget, last September, Abu Mazen stood before the General Assembly. He had made it clear that the international community is failing the Palestinians, that the Palestinian Authority has the responsibility and obligation to protect its people, but Israel is making its actions null and void. Israel is putting hurdles.
There are other hurdles for the PA. In the 2 weeks since Hamas's attack on Israel, here in the West Bank, at least 80 people have been killed in confrontations with Israeli forces and armed Jewish settlers. On Thursday, an Israeli raid and airstrike on a refugee camp in the region killed 13 people, including 5 children. Anger here is growing. This group of protesters may be small, but it's enough for the Israeli military to take strong action.
Up on the hilltop you can see Israeli snipers. They've been shooting live rounds of ammunition to these protesters who've been burning tyres and throwing stones. So far the paramedics say 7 people have been shot, including one of their own.
The West Bank is not a major focus of the Israeli military response for now. But with the public losing even more faith in the Palestinian Authority and support for Hamas apparently growing, there is a fear here that that could soon change.
Protests in the West Bank flare up as Israel escalates actions. Israeli military spokesperson confirms increased air and ground operations in Gaza, with reports of intense bombardments. A local telecommunication firm and the Red Crescent said that internet and mobile phone services were cut off in the Palestinian territory, and the Air Force is conducting extensive strikes on tunnels and other infrastructure in the Hamas-controlled Gaza Strip. Video shared on social media showed police in New York arresting protesters at Grand Central Terminal who were calling for a ceasefire in the conflict between Israel and Hamas. Among those detained was actor and model India Moore. Hundreds of protesters had flooded Grand Central Terminal on Friday in the demonstration organized by Jewish Voice for Peace, forcing officials to close one of New York City's major transit hubs. Also, thousands of New Zealanders rallied in the capital Wellington, marching to Parliament House in support of the Palestinian people. Those who attended the rally held placard reading "Free Palestine" and Palestinian flags while chanting. We don't want your bloody war! Thousands of Palestinian supporters rallied in Sydney also on Sunday, calling for an end to the violence in Gaza. Protesters marched through the city to the chants of "Free Palestine" and carried signs and bloodied dolls. Earlier in the day, an Israeli march also took place with a protest in Sydney's Martin Place that featured shoes, trams and wheelchairs, symbolizing hostages taken by Hamas.
Palestine will be free!
Hamas leader Khalid Mashal's virtual participation at a pro-Palestine event organized by the Solidarity Youth Movement. The youth wing of the Jamaat-e-Islami in Malappuram has stirred up a controversy. The event was organized on 28th October. The Solidarity Youth Movement raised the slogan, quote, "Uproot bulldozer Hindutva and apartheid Zionism," unquote, during its rally, and attempted to strike a close relationship between the ideologies of Hindutva and Zionism. Former head of Hamas, Mashal, addressed the rally online and called upon the world to aid Hamas in its war against Israel. His address at the rally caused a huge row as India stands firmly against terrorism. The BJP state president Kerala, K. Sundaran, called for the arrest of the organizers. The BJP Kerala unit said the ruling party in Kerala was trying to glorify Hamas under the guise of, quote, "Save Palestine," unquote, slogan. The BJP said the Hamas was a terror group and any connection with it or support to it should be condemned. Matthew Perry, everyone's favorite friend on Friends, sadly passed away on 28th October at his Los Angeles home. He was only 54. Law enforcement sources are reporting that Matthew Perry was found dead of an apparent drowning in his hot tub at his home in Pacific Palisades of Los Angeles, California. Reports are also ruling out any foul play in his death. However, the cause of his death hasn't been confirmed by the authorities as yet. Perry starred in a lot of movies and TV shows over his career, but he is best remembered as the lovable Chandler Bing on Friends. The sitcom Friends was a juggernaut that ran for 10 seasons and made all the 6 leads of the show into mega stars. Matthew Perry's distinctive contribution to the iconic ensemble cast of Friends was evident in his involvement in shaping Chandler's character. It's a well-known fact that Perry contributed significantly to the show by writing many of Chandler's memorable lines, effectively infusing the character with his own personality and wit. Chandler became a beloved figure, cherished by viewers of all ages. Despite the applaud and fame Perry got for his role on the show, he continued to struggle with alcohol and substance abuse issues all his life. In 2022, Perry, in his memoir titled Friends, Lovers and the Big Terrible Thing, spoke at length about his addiction issues and how they affected his life. Perry's friends, family and fans are all distraught and devastated over the shocking news of his death. In a heartbreaking irony, Perry's last picture on Instagram was a picture of the hot tub, which has now gone viral. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who was a classmate of Perry, posted on X saying, quote, Matthew Perry's passing is shocking and saddening. I'll never forget the schoolyard games we used to play. And I know people around the world are never going to forget the joy he brought to them. Thanks for all the laughs, Matthew. You were loved and you will be missed, unquote. The official account of Friends on Instagram posted a heartfelt tribute to Perry, writing, quote, we are devastated to learn of Matthew Perry's passing. He was a true gift to us all, unquote. NBC, which aired Friends from 1994 to 2004, said in a statement, and I quote, we are incredibly saddened by the too soon passing of Matthew Perry. He brought so much joy to hundreds of millions of people around the world with his pitch-perfect comedic timing and wry wit. His legacy will live on through countless generations, and unquote. Indian stars like Ranveer Singh, Kareena Kapoor, Kiara Advani, Bipasha Basu all paid tribute to Matthew Perry. Perry is survived by his parents. Tens of thousands of opposition supporters have flooded the streets of Bangladesh's capital, protesting against Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina's government. They demand her resignation before the upcoming January general election, the transfer of power to an interim caretaker government, and the release of charges against Khaleda Zia, the ailing chief of the Bangladesh Nationalist Party. To allow her medical treatment abroad, over 1 lakh supporters from major opposition parties have called for Hasina to step down for a free and fair vote under a neutral government. Clashes erupted near the city's largest Catholic church, with opposition supporters allegedly involved in violence and incidents like torching a bus and a police post. BNP and Jamaat-e-Islami have declared a nationwide strike in protest. The clashes resulted in at least 2 deaths and numerous injuries as security forces confronted opposition members in multiple locations in Dhaka. The conflict began in the Kakrel area when BNP activists led by former Prime Minister Khaleda Zia reportedly attacked the bus carrying members of the ruling Awami League to a separate rally nearby. Last week, Bhutan's Foreign Minister Tandi Dorji made a historic visit to Beijing, drawing attention to the Himalayan kingdom. Dorji's visit to Beijing was warmly received, featuring meetings with Vice President Hang Zheng and Foreign Minister Wang Yi, as well as a tour of the city's historical landmarks. According to China's Foreign Ministry, what's been dubbed as a breakthrough by Chinese experts led to the signing of a cooperation agreement outlining the responsibilities and functions of a technical team for border delineation. Bhutan has always had strong ties with India and is the only Asian country without formal diplomatic relations with China. It's also one of 2 nations with ongoing land border disputes with China, the other being India. The heart of the matter lies in border talks that began in 1984, focusing on the contested Doklam Plateau, where a tense standoff between Chinese and Indian troops occurred in 2017. During the recent visit of Bhutan's Foreign Minister Tandi Dorji to Beijing, progress was reportedly made in these border negotiations, indicating a warming relationship between China and one of India's closest allies. Thank you very much for watching News9 Live. It's a wrap from me.
BrahMos. Stealthy, lethal, precise. It flies at